Guys, we're down here at Working Man Outdoors Lodge, duck hunting camp, located near Mamou, Louisiana, if I pronounce it correctly.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. But we got Robert and Zach, the owners of Working Man Outdoors. I'm happy to have Mr. Josh Goins from the Flyway Federation. I always want to say foundation for whatever reason. We're going to be doing some talking, and I got Mr. Miquel Savoy. Am I pronouncing it correct?
Savoy.
Savoy. I'll learn one of these days. The cool thing about today is there's 3 Marines here and an Army guy. So I love Robert to death. Don't get me wrong. But we're just having a little, lack of better words, a little BS session. We're going to be talking about ducks in general and released ducks. We're going to talk about corn ponds, good, bad, or ugly. But we're just going to be talking about, we're having just a little discussion on ducks while we're out here during this early teal season down here in Louisiana. So I'll start it off. We're going to start off by released ducks and kind of give y'all an idea of what's going on. And I think it's starting to push over into Louisiana. But on the Atlantic Flyway, for well over 100 years, there has been game farm raised mallard ducks being released. These released ducks can be traced back to European origins, where they were brought over as food. They didn't know that we had mallards here when they brought them. This has been, back in the day in sailing ships. But as population exploded, as big cities, towns would pop up, people started raising these ducks to be released, not only for food, but for sport. It has progressed from the New England states all the way down into South Carolina and even, I believe, Georgia and even Florida. But to give you some idea we're all duck hunters here. We all know what mallard is. In order to sell a game farm bird, it has to be 3 years removed from the wild bird strain. That's number 1. Number 2, these birds genetically have smaller bodies. They have longer legs, shorter wings, and a smaller bill that's pointed like a chicken or a coots or even wood ducks. The teeth, the filtering teeth that a mallard has, or all puddle ducks have, there's also fewer of those. Now, they started in South Carolina. I'm going to South Carolina because that's where I'm from, and that's where I know most of it. And Robert and Zach, also from South Carolina, can chime in. But around 1980, early 80s, mid 80s, the Atlantic Flyway mallard population started going downhill. So what would happen is guys who still want to hunt ducks decided to start making these corn ponds. That a lot of the natural foods had disappeared from our swamps, and they would build these corn ponds. Well, they still weren't getting any ducks. So they came up with game farm released ducks. And they would gather up these ducks. Some of these farms, some of these impounds would order up to 5,000 mallard ducklings. They would take them to a pen, and they would keep them in the pen and feed them scratch corn. There's where the longer legs, because they're walking instead of swimming, so they naturally over time would get longer legs, and they would peck at the corn. And when they got of flight age, they would release the ducks. Well, they're not going anywhere. They're going to sit right there in that little pond, that little holding pond. Well, they then started draining those ponds so these ducks would get up and go to other ponds that they had as hunting ponds, not where they, this was a raising pond. So they would send them out and they would hopefully go to these other ponds. 90% of them were banded with a local company name in South Carolina. And, you know, we as hunters, they just acted different. They didn't respond to calls correctly, you know, like most wild ducks will. It really was a really hard thing to watch these, what we call tamies. Because, I mean, you could shake a red bag at them and they would come in. But 2 years ago, Dr. Phil Levinsky from Texas, El Paso, is the leading waterfowl DNA biologist. 2 years ago, he started a study here in South Carolina where they collected tongue samples of mallards, black ducks, and mottled ducks. And did this for 2 years. At the end of the study, they found out this, that over 50% of the mallard shot in South Carolina had game farm DNA, whether it was European descent or of American game farm descent. Over 50%. Black ducks, they could not find any, if my memory serves me correctly, they couldn't find any game farm DNA, and mottled ducks, I believe, was 10 or 15%. So these ducks are, the only way that this can happen, and they know they shot wild ducks. They shot wild mallards, and they shot game farm ducks. It's just because of the size and the way they look. So now they believe, highly believe, that these ducks are migrating north and they're breeding and nesting with wild ducks, whether in the Atlantic Flyway. Well, anybody with any sense knows that ducks not only travel north-south, they travel east and west. So there's crossovers. So these ducks possibly could be crossing over into the Mississippi and Central Flyway, which is y'all's home territory. Now, with that said, they can't 100% claim it until they do telemetry, GPS telemetry on some captured ducks. So until that happens, it's not, you know, we won't know. The biggest thing that they want is, in talking to I call him Dr. Phil, his best friend, Dr. Rick Kamansky, who is retired now, lives in South Carolina. I've talked to him numerous occasions. They just believe, they don't have solid proof, these ducks are cross.
My question is,
yeah.
So telemetry data, putting telemetry data on would be great, but every one of these birds is banded, correct?
They've quit the banding on...
Some places have quit the banding.
Go ahead.
Some places have quit the banding.
Some places have quit the banding.
Some.
That should be a requirement in the story, because let's say that these birds are becoming a major problem, or let's say that a certain farmer's birds get infected with an avian disease. Well, it's kind of like chickens or whatever. If a chicken farm, if one of their chickens gets sick, guess what happens? They come in and take out the entire farm.
Isn't that what happened here just 6-8 months ago?
So with that being said, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, in my opinion, ought to be able to track those birds back to a person who's raising.
And not only that, but a lot of these birds, again, are raised in these holding ponds, and they just go to these hunting ponds. Yeah. Well, if they don't shoot all of those birds, isn't that the same as live decoys, which has been banned for over 100 years?
Yeah.
I mean, you think there's so much, U.S. Fish and Game needs to get involved with all of this.
And on that, I know several places that will let those, what we call chicken mallards. They'll let the chicken mallards land so that they can shoot wild ducks, and then they'll shoot the chicken mallards.
Right.
I know several places that
Now, I haven't been there, but, and I was telling Josh earlier.
You can't prove it, but I know they do it. I've seen that.
Yeah. I was telling Josh earlier, I haven't been there, I haven't seen it in person, but I've heard stories. There's actually one place in Georgia that has these birds stuffed in a pen. And they take their high dollar clients out to the blind, and they'll hit a high ball, then they'll hit a feed chuckle, and when they hear the feed chuckle, the guy over at the pen releases the birds, and they get up, they fly, they come straight into because they've been conditioned either by we had a little argument about that, they've either been conditioned to come to the pond, or they were conditioned to go to the feed chuckle to get food.
But it's not a live decoy because their wings aren't clipped.
Their wings are not, well, most live decoys, their wings aren't clipped anyway, they're tethered. But the bird is still in the water quacking and doing everything else. It is, I would say, quote unquote, similar. So similar.
Dale's talked about the live decoys a lot.
Yeah.
Dale Boardlawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his old stories are pretty cool. But so there's two forms I know of that does it here in Louisiana. One of them is a friend of mine. Another one is a ranch. But their operation is a little bit different, like what I was telling y'all.
Right.
And they don't release a ton of them at one time.
Right.
So the way that they condition their birds, and what I've been told by guys that's guided at these places, is they raise these birds in a pen, and the pen is right beside a pond. And these birds want to be in that water. And it's their natural instinct. They're waterfowl. They want to be in that pond. But yet they can't. They're pinned up. So those birds sit there and look at that water their entire life and can't get to it, other than the water that they put in for them.
Yeah.
And as soon as they get ready to send them out, they put them into a stock trailer and they take them out, and they might be right on the other side of the woods with this blind, and you never know. And there'll be guys sitting in the blind, and they hit a radio comm to that guy to release, and he releases it. Once they get up over the tree, they see a pond, that's where they go. They're not going anywhere. And they're not releasing so large numbers that they're not getting away from it. These guys are going to shoot these birds.
Right.
And then even if they fly off for a second, they're coming right back.
Happens in Welsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna name them.
No, that's a friend of mine. But they don't release tons of them at one time to where there's no control over them. And then they'll radio to them and tell them how many more they need, to fuel their required quota.
Yeah.
Now, what I was telling Josh and Robert and Zach know this, and I've just met you, so we had a previous conversation. Well, we have a Santee Cooper lakes in South Carolina, comprised of two lakes, Lake Marion and Lake Walsh.
Good bass fishing?
Great
Awesome.
bass.
I got a 14 pound, 13 ounce,
Toby and Toledo Bend.
14 pounds, 13 ounces by PB out of there.
Can't fish all of it.
It's by PB. But there's a boat ramp called Jack's Creek, right across over this Carolina King. But from Jack's Creek all the way up the lake into an area we call Sparkleberry Swamp, there is well over 200 corn ponds on the edge of that lake. Now, I don't know if all of them are doing it anymore, but at one time, every one of them was releasing ducks. And that's just one area of South Carolina. You have the Georgetown area, the east coast of South Carolina, where, and I meant to say this earlier, when they did the study, there was a higher percentage of the ducks that were shot and tested. Majority of them came from Georgetown. that came up as to be game farm ducks. So, and then you've got the upstate area where Zach's at. You're more PD area. I'm on the border of Midlands and Low Country, but I can take you right now, if we were at my house, and take you to 5 corn ponds, and I live in the city limits. I'm out, my little subdivision is just outside the city, but we're still in the city limits. I can take you to 5 corn ponds to release ducks less than 3 minutes away. So it's not just one area, there's areas, and that's just South Carolina. We're not talking about what's in North Carolina on the coast, or in the Midlands of North Carolina, or in the mountains section. We're not talking about Virginia and West Virginia, or Maryland,
Or even New York.
or even New York State. This is the whole Atlantic Flyway.
I can take you to one to about 2.5 hours from here in Texas.
Yeah,
And they raise flighted mallards.
flighted mallards.
Yep, flighted
And
mallards.
this is what they
I
are,
can
the
see
flighted
that.
mallards. I've been against it. I mean, you got to understand, in the 80s, I'm 60 years old. I shot my first duck when I was 7. And when they started this, at first it was just the corn ponds. It was like, I didn't know much about it. That's food for the ducks. I'll bring more ducks to the area. You can hunt the edges of the lake to maybe hopefully shoot something like hunting button up in private property down on the coast here. You're in the public, but right behind you is the levee that goes into private. So you can still hunt in front of you. You just can't do anything behind you. So it was okay. We didn't really know what was going on. But from day one of released ducks, I've been against it. I said, you don't know what you're bringing. You don't know what you're bringing as far as diseases. And still studies have not been completed on even that.
The biological mind of a bird
Right.
completely changes.
And,
Their ability to imprint.
Their ability to breed, imprint, nest,
Migrate.
everything they do at a
It never learned to
minimal
migrate.
level
It doesn't know a
compared to
pattern.
doesn't know it. I can take you to my brother-in-law's house where he's got resident mallards in South Carolina this time of year. No, they're not resident mallards. They're game farm ducks who just didn't migrate.
Gerard Park.
Yeah, I've been to Washington D.C. I've been to big cities. You go into a park and you got in the middle of the summertime, you got mallards that shouldn't be there.
Mallards.
They are. I guarantee you that you're looking at
game farm birds.
game farm birds.
Somebody found a new farmer to feed them.
Right.
The general public.
So let me ask y'all something. This is something that I've thought about, and I don't know if it's due to social media and more people posting pictures of stuff that they kill, or if it's due to game farm mallards. But have y'all noticed the rise in hybrid ducks?
Yes.
Pintail, skull, you name it, that these mallards are breeding to. I never really heard about that or saw that. And is it social media, or is it that
There's just more of
that these game farm mallards are more prevalent and that they will breed anything that a wild mallard won't?
My understanding. I'm not a biologist by no means, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn the other night. A mallard is very voracious, if I pronounced that right. They will breed with other ducks. Over 50 years I've been duck hunting, I've never killed a hybrid duck. Pintail, mallard, cross, whatever. My dad is 82. As far as I know, he has never killed one. My first reaction would be social media.
I killed one, first in my life, in Johnson Bayou 2 years ago. And it was a Weegian great up cross. And it was beautiful.
What?
And that was the only time I've ever seen one in real life other than pictures.
I mean, we do know that other ducks will nest, like whistlers, the whistling ducks, the blacks and the fulvus. They will invade a wood duck nesting area and lay their eggs in there. We know that. Wood ducks will do the same to them. I believe goldeneye are tree nesters, if I'm not mistaken. Y'all don't kill me on that one, but they will invade another nest. They won't kill the eggs, but they'll invade another nest. So to me, in my mind, why wouldn't they breed? Why wouldn't they breed with one, you know?
So my question to you is, the 200 corn ponds
Yeah.
that you're talking about, how much acreage, if you had to guess, let's just say, let's say for each property
Whoa.
is a block, how many acres is that?
Average, probably 1,000 to 1,200 acres
A block?
per block. And you're talking miles of lakeside.
It takes you, if I live now by road, take me 20 minutes to go from one end to the other by road, driving at 55 miles an hour.
So that sounds a lot.
That's just the
Like-
section he's talking about.
That's just
Yeah.
the section I'm talking about. Now, from as a boat standpoint, running the creek and running the lake, and it's a very stumpy lake, and I happen, Robert will tell you, I know that lake.
Dangerous.
I know that lake pretty well, and I can run it full blast, with or without a mud motor. 45 minutes boat, and that's going wide open, 25, 30 horsepower motor.
So that's kind of the same thing from Jeff Foles across from him in just north of St. Louis. Now, whenever I first started researching this stuff, all that I could find on Google Earth and Onyx was about 40-something miles. Now, there's roughly 70 miles. And, you know, I know all of y'all have been following me since
Right.
I came out. If y'all remember correctly, whenever I first brought all this out, this didn't exist. Corn ponds didn't exist at all. Like, they would argue tooth and nail.
It didn't exist,
Yeah.
but it did.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
but they didn't want that getting out to the people in the South. There was people that knew about it, but to us it was strictly baiting, and you still wouldn't do it in Louisiana. Okay? Well, then they went from it didn't exist, that's not happening, to, well, it's happening on conservation areas, state areas, and refuge. But it's only a small amount.
Yeah.
Well, then it progressed from that to, yeah, it's happening on private lands, but not to the extent that you're saying. Well, then now it's just full blown,
It's there.
and they don't care what videos they post. I can't remember who it was. Whether one of y'all, we were talking earlier, and they said that someone had made a TikTok or something, basically saying that they didn't care. Oh, it was Brandon. I was talking to him. He saw a TikTok, and it was some guys shooting into teal in Missouri, and he goes, I love shooting into these big volleys. I love educating all these birds, just so that whenever they get down south, those hunters are screwed.
Yeah.
Like, why would you even say stuff
I mean,
like that?
you know, when we were talking, you started 2000 and...
I made my first post. I didn't even have a Facebook. I made my first post in writing, article or whatever, or rant, I guess you'd say, on Louisiana Sportsman in the comments section, and it was called "Where Are the Ducks?" And it went viral. And then everyone got with me, wanted me to start something up. I started Flyway in the end of 2018, and but if y'all noticed, they almost do something to get at me. If you go look at what's the title of the Gros Savon video with all the guys, whenever they did the round table, where they the status of waterfowl.
Right.
What was the title of that? Where are the ducks? And they've steadily repeated that title on all these shows and podcasts and everything
Steal your thunder.
Steal your thunder.
to,
Well,
to
you
go
started,
against what I said.
so the Flyway Federation started in 2018, but yet in early 1980s, we already had corn ponds lining the swamp, lining the lake. And
Was it on state conservation area?
no, with private property.
Problem.
Okay. Now, those people, did they
Grab
have
me a-
permits?
Grab me a
Because
drink.
They had
Grab
to
me
have
some,
permits
please.
to be doing the
You want a
game
peach
farm.
tea?
Yeah.
Yeah, now they had permits for the game farm. I don't think they had to have a permit for a corn farm.
No.
So me and Jeff Foles was talking about this, and he said the only flooded corn, and even whenever we went to Illinois and met with a couple of organizations, one older gentleman tried to argue, and he says, no, we've always had that. I hunted it during the 1960s, and the guy goes, really? Well, if you did, either you had a permit to do it, or you were doing it illegally, and they just allowed you to get away with it. And he was like, no. After the meeting, that same guy that was arguing walks up to us and he goes, man, I'm sorry. I do remember now we had a permit to do it.
Right.
So during those times, even if it was being done at certain areas, it was not being done to the scale that we have in the Flyway Road.
Right.
At all.
At all.
I mean,
you look at,
whenever you have private individuals that has upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 acres,
More than that.
yeah,
well, yeah,
Some of them,
but,
one in particular.
one in particular,
but that's massive. And then you factor how many ducks it can hold and for how many days they can hold them. They
We got a-
don't have to.
They don't have to
well,
go
we
in
had
there.
a place called the Thanksgiving Home, which we hunted
We still got it.
every Thanksgiving morning. It was somewhere we could go quick, it was a walk-in. The walk-in was at 75 yards. The worst 75 yards you ever had to walk. Imagine Camp Pendleton walking up the mountain. I won't name it, the real name of it, with your ruck but going through knee-deep mud, waist-deep sometimes. That's how bad it was. But it was a great little spot to shoot some wood ducks. Right on the other side was a corn pond, impound, private duck club, and we could watch the mallards doing this. We could watch the wood ducks doing this and go, and we were 300 yards, 400 yards from it. It's really, I mean, it stops the migration. It stops them from going places and searching for food, the corn pond.
They're fight or flight leaving.
Right. You know, I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Ducks need three things. They need food, they need water, and they need rest. That's all they need. We need the weather to bring them down. That's all we need. But when you introduce corn ponds, I don't care if it's froze up solid, they can still get those cobs. And it ain't nothing for a duck to go and feed on corn, on ice, and then get up, if there's no ice eaters, by the way, and get up and fly 100 miles south below the ice line to get water and to roost.
We just went to the river.
Or go to the
Yeah,
river.
Missouri River.
So it's,
Missouri Rivers, I don't think ever frozen in the history. Mississippi's
So-
frozen over 3 times, I think, in written history, and one of those times was in recent years. But yet, they tell us it's going to be cold.
right.
That's what they feed to us.
Yeah.
But then you go up and talk to the Illinois guys, and they're like, those guys are full of crap. Like, it gets
Ducks
cold
are
here.
going up here before the
And-
season's even out.
Just a few very simple numbers, which are all verifiable, if you're familiar with them. We've had pretty cold winters recently, not
Yes, yes.
consistently, but nonetheless, inconsistent as they are. And in December of this last hunting season, less than a year ago, in southwest Louisiana, according to the state survey, we only had 17,000 mallards in southwest Louisiana.
Right.
20 years earlier, there were hundreds of thousands of that particular duck, mallards in southwest Louisiana. And a lot of people wouldn't believe you if you said this, but the continental numbers were at one of their highest points in recorded history only 10 years ago, in 2015.
Yeah, that was 80. My number.
People in Louisiana would never believe that because they've seen the duck decline begin 15 years before that.
In the 1950s, the Santee National Wildlife Refuge held, the Santee National Wildlife Refuge is quote unquote the final stop for the Atlantic mallard on its journey south. In the 1950s, they estimated over 500,000 mallards, just mallards, wintered at the Santee National Wildlife Refuge, which borders that Jack's Creek Landing I was telling you about, which would border all of those corn ponds.
That's hundreds of thousands of acres.
Yeah. Now,
It's the entire lower upper level.
right, now, I believe it was, the last numbers I just got fed up with it, but about 5 years ago, I asked them what their numbers, their wintering numbers were, and on mallards, and they couldn't give me a mallard. All they said was, we got about 5,000 ducks that wintered here. We went from 500,000
So
mallards
South
to
Carolina,
5,000 wintering ducks.
so,
That includes every, you name it.
All
It goes.
so if we're going just off of numbers, let's say those ducks were mallards. That would mean that that specific location took a 90% drop
That's correct.
in wintering mallards.
Yes.
Well, Louisiana, we hadn't ran the numbers for
About 98%.
I think it's now to
25
98.
years.
Whenever we ran the last time, ran the numbers, it was 96%. That was 2 years ago. So you're seeing this trend in South Carolina, Louisiana. Now it's extending into Arkansas,
Right.
the coastal of Texas. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
So, with that being said, there's a couple of things that gets blamed. Weather, for one. Whereas we can see weather goes in cycles. They're using that because that's one of the agendas that's happening in our country right now for funding and liberal parties, okay? So fine, we throw that out. They use the breeding counts now because they're a little bit lower. Oh, that's fine.
33.9, I believe. Was
So, then pressure. You hear this pressure. How many duck hunters have y'all lost in South Carolina
lost.
that do not hunt waterfowl anymore?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the number.
Steady game.
It's steady on the rise. Every one of my friends that I grew up in high school with, that I duck hunted religiously with, and I had a graduating class of over 700. As far as I know, none of them but me continue to duck hunt.
Let me see. I'll look up.
Because they won't call me, they used to call me every year, hey, what's the ducks look like? Because they knew I was out in the swamp. They knew I was scouting. What did the duck numbers look like? Ain't nothing but a bunch of wood ducks, dude.
The majority of the people we know from back home that still duck hunt, they all travel out here,
They don't
Arkansas,
duck
Okay.
South Carolina.
Oklahoma. They don't hunt at home.
Yeah, they don't hunt them.
Okay, with that being said, they'd have to buy a stamp in that state.
Yeah.
Endorsement,
Yeah.
the waterfowl.
Correct.
Louisiana's endorsement for waterfowl has went down over 90,000.
Wow.
90,000 people. Okay, so I understand wherever the ducks are, duck hunters are gonna be there,
Right.
especially with social media.
Yeah.
Okay, so these guys that are saying, oh, it's the pressure, there's all these guys that are running these mud boats. Dude, they were running mud boats with 350s on them.
Yeah.
Whenever I was a kid, airboats that would blow every bird out of the marsh, but guess what? They came right back to that marsh. And so they say pressure. Well, the reason why it's pressure now that affects it is because there's not very many birds here. So whereas whenever we had a lot of birds and they were spread out, everyone else, all these other 90,000 hunters were spread out as well. Well, now that we have a smaller portion of birds and they make a post and say, oh, we had a good hunt. Well, Joe Blow knows that that stump and that tree is in this hole on that refuge. Well, guess what happens the next weekend?
They be in there.
Okay, so that's why they think there's way more hunters now. I had a debate with a young boy the other day about this. But everyone says that Louisiana is upset because we've lost the mallards. It's not just the mallard. If you look at any dabbling duck in Louisiana, gray ducks, whenever we ran the numbers, were like 65% down in Louisiana. Even though in 2018 or 19, gray ducks had the highest population they've ever recorded within the breeding ground, ever. So all these dabbling ducks are now stopping short and not coming to Louisiana. But yet they say that it's all these other problems, but if you look at the diving duck,
Still here.
they follow the trends of the breeding ground. Just like what the dabblers did prior to all this crap happening.
There's only one. We're talking about, the mallard release program, the mud mallards, mutt mallards,
Chicken mouth.
chicken mallards, taming,
That's what I-
whatever you want to call them. Everywhere you go in South Carolina, they got a different name.
Ain't nothing but a chicken that looks
But
like.
the biggest, not the biggest, but the corn. We all know corn works. Everybody in here knows that corn works. But we've conditioned these ducks with corn ponds. And I want to get on that corn pond debate, but the corn pond has now conditioned the mallard and other dabblers to quit searching for the foods that they really, the smart weeds,
They're welfare ducks.
I was getting ready to say they're Democrats, but I didn't want to disparage anybody, but they're welfare ducks, and they're not out there searching for food, which then brings in the migration portion of this. Again, I'm no scientist, but
Well, you don't have to be, and I'm glad you said that because, when we started this conversation, we were talking about the history of Mamu.
right.
And if you go to any gas station or any deli or any restaurant or place where they have a chair and a table and you can buy a cup of coffee, you can find people saying the same thing you'll find on Facebook, the same thing you'll find on any kind of online forum regarding waterfowl or duck hunting. You can find it at Walmart or a grocery store or a sporting goods store. Anyone and everyone who you meet and talk about this issue with will say the exact same thing. Whether or not they have a PhD next to their name, whether they're a biologist, or whether they are an electrician, or they work on an oil rig, it doesn't matter what the hell they do, they all agree that it's a problem, except for people that have a shit ton of money to lose if practice changes.
Right.
And they're not stupid.
Me and Josh were talking, and I'm quite sure you've heard this, and Robert, me and you and Zach, we've all had this conversation in the past. And I'm no farmer. I don't know the first thing about farming. But I do know that corn doesn't grow in water. I know that for a fact. I know that it is not an agricultural process to grow corn and then flood it unless you're farming for ducks.
That's why corn's not a big crop south of I-10 in Louisiana. It's not a crop south of I-10 in Louisiana.
Right.
The first real corn you see in Louisiana, from this point, is over an hour from here in Buckles, Louisiana.
Right.
And that's just the start of where it becomes reputable and possible to have a good yield in corn, because otherwise it's too wet.
Right.
It's too low, exactly.
Well, in South Carolina's a big corn state. We all know that. Now, I'm gonna be quite honest with you. I love private land ownership. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very important in our not only our society but in game management and the whole 9 yards. So I am all for private ownership. I am against corn ponds. But really, when you break it down into the simple man as myself, what's the difference between bringing water to the corn or bringing corn to the water?
No difference.
In my opinion, there's no difference.
It actually, if you really think about this, and me and Miguel talked about it, it actually, dumping corn in the water itself, the duck is still gonna have to dabble and dive for it.
Right.
They're gonna have to work for it,
Right.
okay? Not only that, it's gonna deteriorate,
Quick.
okay? And, Jeff Foles has said it many times. He said it would actually be harder for them to work for the corn that you dump than to swim up to the ear of corn that the water is perfectly placed at for them to
Every
access the
time,
corn.
yep. For the water gets deeper as the season progresses. Because they're gonna start off low, to get those low ears, and as they eat that down and the season progresses, that water's gonna get risen up a little bit, and it's gonna go up, and it's gonna go up, and it's gonna go up. And I have never seen, ever, in 50 years of duck hunting, a mallard bottom feeding in 4 feet of water. It don't happen. And anybody, and everybody in this
It
room,
makes the water sweet, they can smell it.
yeah, it's just not gonna, it doesn't work. You talk about, now I got no problem with you planting a field and harvesting that corn. Now, I'm gonna get a little outlaw-ish here in a minute, and you kind of raise your gate up a little bit and something spills out, and then flood it afterwards. I got no problem with that, because now you still have some, you're always gonna have spillage. Of course, today's machinery, you're not gonna have as much.
Well, it's still 2 to 3%.
Right.
Okay,
And then
so
you're gonna have
think about how many, like I did the math on it not too long ago, and we did all the corn acres within the Mississippi Flyway. We pulled all of the corn acres. Now, with modern day combines, you're at a 2 to 3% loss.
Right.
Now, this is all fresh science. This isn't old science, okay? This
I've heard
is
the same thing.
up to date. And we did it, I think we did it on Missouri, Illinois, and a couple others. There is enough waste grain off of modern day combines to support the entire breeding population. Not just the birds coming down the Mississippi Flyway, but the entire breeding population for an entire season. But he could support the birds that historically, the 5.7 million ducks that they come down the Mississippi Flyway, he could support them for 27 seasons, every single season. Waste grain.
Waste grain.
That's just corn.
Yeah.
That's not beans. That's not any other commercial crop, commodity crop at all.
The supposition that you make, which is very relevant, and I think you were saying this, that we're all independent-minded people here.
Yeah.
We respect our inalienable rights, like
Right.
life, liberty, and property. And people are weary, and rightfully so, they should be, to tell people what to do with their own land.
Right.
However, this is a natural resource, and precedent will tell you, if you look at any Supreme Court decision before 1950, you don't have to look any recently than that. A case like Wickard versus Filburn, when under FDR and the New Deal, commodity prices need to be regulated during the Great Depression. A farmer in the Midwest sued the federal government because he was told he couldn't grow wheat to feed his own family because of the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. And the Commerce Clause, which has been understood before that case, but since then, that it has a very, very large grasp. And it regulates not only interstate commerce, it regulates intrastate commerce within the state. And not only that, but it also regulates activity that could affect indirectly the stream of commerce. So it has a very, very broad reach. So you're telling me this gentleman who was growing wheat to feed his own family during the Great Depression, he wasn't selling it, he wasn't giving it away to anyone outside of his homestead. That was illegal. Okay? If that's illegal, how the hell is it legal for you or anyone else to plant what is tantamount cumulatively to tens of thousands of acres of corn that you do not intend to harvest, merely to flood and manipulate a natural resource?
Right.
And disproportionately hold it on your private property for 60 days.
Now, I just got one other question.
How's
You
it-
were a Marine? You're an intelligent Marine, bud. You didn't eat purple crayons, did you?
It's because the
I
blue,
like the green ones.
The green ones.
I'm about to say it's because the blue ones taste better.
I love the blue. I like the purple ones
Y'all
myself.
all go with
I like my
that joke.
greens.
We have to, but we have to. It's funny.
I just think it's funny. You think it's a joke.
It isn't. Now, I did study that in law school.
Right.
But you don't have to go to law school to understand these very basic concepts. That we have more wetlands than a majority of these states in the Mississippi Flyway, in our particular flyway. We're talking about the Atlantic Flyway too. I mean, we still have pretty damn cold winters in various years over the last 2 decades.
Right.
We still have plenty of rice. They could say maybe the rice variety is the same, or we don't have as much rice. We have more sugar cane than we did, and that might all be true. But we still have a disproportionate advantage to a lot of our neighboring states in this flyway, and yet they hold all the birds.
Right. And the only reason they're holding birds is corn.
So I've got a funny one for y'all. And this, whenever you pose this to the y'all don't have enough rice no more in Louisiana, this shuts it down.
Yeah.
So Arkansas
Rice
is
capital.
now seeing the same losses that we were seeing 5 to 10 years
Yeah, we
ago.
can vouch for that.
We
We hunt Arkansas heavy.
So,
from tip to tip.
with that being said, Arkansas, #1 rice producer in the United States. Why are they losing? What's stopping them from there?
Zach and I literally sat in a blind watching the Missouri border in northern Arkansas.
Now,
The
literally
guys-
a 500-yard distance. We got our hunt stand from the line we were sitting. The end of that field, there's a railroad track. On the side of that railroad track is Missouri. There's a tree line. The other side of that tree line
Was a field.
field. You already know what was in that field.
Those
Nothing
boys
was-
sat over there and shot all day long.
They would-
saw one duck.
Yep, they'd
And they
flare
were
a bird.
500 yards away.
That bird would hit the end of the pond, he'd come right into Arkansas and would fly, hit that tree line, and go right back into that corn.
So I'll tell y'all something, and I know he's not gonna care if I say his name, but Ronnie Doucette, he sits on, whenever I backed out, like had too much going on and left the Flyway Federation, just, I put it in the hands of good people. Ronnie became the president. Now he sits on the board since we kicked everything back off. But Ronnie went on a hunting trip to Mexico just this year, and there was a guy that was hunting there. I forget which state. I think he might have even been from North Carolina or South Carolina. That was hunting with him, and he said, "Yeah, man, I killed a telemetry mallard this year in Tennessee." And he's like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, but you won't ever believe this story." He goes, "Well, tell me about it." He said, "So I kill it and I call it in." He said, "So the biologist comes from the feds and the state biologist shows up." And he said they kept saying, "I can't believe that duck crossed the river. I just can't believe it." And he said, "I didn't know what they was talking about. I thought it was weird that they kept repeating it. The duck, I can't believe the duck didn't cross the river, or that it crossed the river." They had been following the same duck for 3 years with telemetry. It was going into an unhunted corn impoundment, okay? And it would not leave a 200-yard space for 3 years. Once it got to that area, for 3 years, it would not move. It stayed there. But this time, it just happened to cross the river, and this guy shot. We're talking about they know that these birds won't even cross a river, but yet they will argue with me and say that it's not a problem.
Yeah, there's not manipulation.
You know, you go South Carolina and I gotta give her some kudos, was the very first rice state in the colonies. There were presidents, former presidents, senators, congressmen, politicians, the elites of the elite would come to South Carolina to hunt ducks.
In Georgia too.
In Georgia,
Yep.
they would come. Now, in the late 60s, I believe it was either 66 or 67, South Carolina held its very first duck calling contest. The winner was to go to Arkansas to get on main stage. We all know. And go to Stuttgart. And they actually got a guide to take that winner, on a hunt. That was part of the deal. You were going to go to main stage, and then you were going to go on a guided hunt. The guide called and said, "Don't come, because we don't have any ducks." They were only allowed one duck, one mallard. South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, was 4, maybe 5 at the time. We had, in the 60s, we had guys coming to South Carolina from Arkansas, Louisiana, to shoot mallards. Now, there was a really weird year, there was a drought, there was a very low population, the breeding population, the whole 9 yards. But they were coming to South Carolina to hunt mallards. That's what we had. We had them. Growing up, and I was telling Josh this earlier, I didn't shoot my first wood duck when I was almost 17. We didn't shoot wood ducks. We shot mallards. We shot black ducks. We shot pintails. We shot
Big ducks.
We shot nothing but big ducks.
And I'm sorry you waited 17 years to taste a wood duck, because that's the best.
It's the best eating duck in the world, dude. I got a recipe I'm gonna give to you before you leave. I trust me.
I don't know, I've heard those whistlers are pretty good. I don't know if they were pulling our chain or if they
But,
actually are.
One of I know we're in Louisiana and we're talking about Louisiana, we're talking about corn and the central Mississippi Flyway, but I keep wanting to go back to the Atlantic Flyway on how good it was. We didn't have to go anywhere. We went places, we went out of state because we wanted to see something new. We came to Louisiana because, well, we wanted to know, why was your Creole so good? And by the way, our Creole is better, I'm just gonna say it straight up. But, why was your food so good? Huh? I'm not starting a fight, man. We're having fun.
Charleston is just like a mockery of New Orleans.
Exactly.
It really is. A fake French Quarter.
It is.
really
It
is.
is, yeah.
It's a lot cleaner.
I dislike Charleston.
I hate
I refuse to go to Charleston.
I hate driving through there. But, our rice culture in South Carolina is huge. Now, you go down to Georgetown, Samworth, WMA, and from Georgetown all the way down to Charleston, even almost close to Hillhead. You still have some guys who are practicing. Well, I don't want to talk to you somehow my phone.
Check it out.
She's always listening.
She's always listening. Ain't that something?
Yeah, you need to hear this conversation.
One of my buddies invited me last year to go ducking on his private property. He does have a corn pond impoundment. He does not hunt it. But he let me watch. Now, the only thing that was going in there were wood ducks. That was all I saw in there. Well, we went into what they consider the flooded timber. And it's got a mixture of moist soil plants, smart weeds, had some Japanese millet in there, there was a little bit of rice mixed in. It was a waterfowl mixture. We shot mallards and deer. And we shot quite a few of them. But that whole area, they have more ducks going into rice than they do into the cornfield. We went to a rice field that a friend of his, just to show